The twin suns of Terra 5 burned low in the sky, painting the dry plains in gold and red. The wind carried sand and dust like fire through the air. The land was silent, broken only by the faraway hum of old power lines and the rustle of dead grass. Somewhere in that endless nothing, an old human truck rolled slowly down a cracked road. Inside the truck sat Eli Ward, a man with sunburned skin, rough hands, and quiet eyes. He was a rancher, one of the few who still lived on this dying colony. He had no fancy tech, no droids, no helpers, only his land, his animals, and his silence. That evening he was driving home after checking the water tanks when he saw something strange through the dust storm. A dark shape flickered on the road ahead. At first he thought it was a broken vehicle. Then he saw movement, small figures struggling against the wind. Eli slowed down and squinted through the storm. He saw a tall alien woman with silver skin and long dark hair, half covered by a torn cloak. Her arms were wrapped around 3 small alien children, their skin glowing faintly blue in the dim light. They were shivering, scared, and lost. He pulled the truck closer, headlights cutting through the dust. "Hey," he shouted over the wind. "You folks need help?" The woman turned, eyes wide and bright with fear. She didn't answer. Her expression showed pride, but also deep exhaustion. The children clung to her legs, coughing from the dust. Eli got out of the truck, covering his face with his sleeve. "You'll die out here," he said, walking toward them. "There's a storm coming." The woman stepped back. "We do not need," she started to say, her voice strong but trembling. Then her knees gave way. Eli caught her before she hit the ground. The children began crying. "Mama, Mama!" They called in a strange but soft language. Eli looked around. The storm was getting worse. The air howled. He didn't have time to argue. He lifted the woman in his arms and pointed to the kids. "In the truck, now!" he ordered. The oldest child hesitated for a moment, staring at him with large, glowing eyes. Then, as thunder cracked above, she pulled her siblings toward the truck. They climbed in, trembling. Eli placed the unconscious woman gently on the passenger seat and slammed the door. He ran around, jumped behind the wheel, and started the engine. The truck roared to life, shaking from the wind. "Hold on tight," he shouted. He drove fast, the old tires fighting against the rough ground. Dust covered everything. The visibility was near zero. But Eli knew these roads by heart. He'd driven them 100 times in storms worse than this. The children huddled together in the back seat, staring at him in silence. Their eyes were filled with confusion and fear, but also hope. For the first time, someone had stopped for them. Eli glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "We'll get you to safety." One of the children pointed behind them. Eli looked, and his blood turned cold. Through the storm, lights appeared. Blue and red, flashing like knives through the dust. Not human police lights, drones, hunting drones. "Damn it," he muttered. He pressed the accelerator harder. The old truck shook but kept going. The drones followed, their metallic voices echoing through the storm. "Surrender the fugitive. You are harboring an enemy of the Empire." Eli gritted his teeth. "Not today." He turned sharply off the road, heading toward the canyons near his ranch. Rocks shattered under the tires. The truck bounced wildly. The alien woman groaned beside him, starting to wake. Her voice was weak but proud. "You human. Why help me?" Eli didn't take his eyes off the road. "Because you were about to die out there with your kids. That's reason enough." She looked at him, puzzled. "You don't know who I am?" "Don't care," he replied. "You're a mother with children. That's all I need to know." For a moment she stared at him silently. Then she whispered something under her breath in her own language. A word that meant thank you, though Eli didn't understand. Behind them, the drones grew smaller. The canyon walls began to block the signals. Eli drove deeper into the rocky maze until the storm's sound faded to a low whisper. Finally, he stopped the truck near a dry riverbed. He turned off the engine. The silence was thick. The children peeked out the windows, wide-eyed. The woman leaned back in her seat, breathing hard. "You risked your life," she said softly. Eli shrugged. "You can repay me by not dying." That earned him a faint smile. He looked outside. The storm still roared far away, but here it was calm. "We'll head to my ranch," he said. "You and your kids can rest there. Safer than the road." She hesitated, torn between pride and need. Then she nodded slowly. Eli started the truck again and drove toward the faint light of his small ranch house in the distance. The children finally relaxed, leaning against each other, half asleep. But as the truck moved through the night, something metallic glimmered on a far ridge. Another drone watching quietly. Its red eye blinked once, recording their direction, then vanished into the storm. And in that moment, Eli Ward unknowingly stepped into a story that would change not only his life, but the fate of two species. Morning came slowly on Terra 5, painting the ranch in pale gold light. The storm had passed, but the land still smelled of wet dust and burnt metal. The sun rose behind the canyon, touching the old wooden house and the small herd of iron-horn cattle grazing near the fence. Inside the ranch house, Eli Ward poured himself a cup of black coffee. His hands were steady, though his mind was not. The night before still played in his head. The woman, her children, the drones. He had helped strangers before, but never ones who were being hunted by the Valorian Empire itself. He heard movement behind him. Turning, he saw the alien woman standing in the doorway. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the morning light, and her torn robe looked out of place in his simple wooden home. The children sat near the old stove, wrapped in blankets, staring at the small fire like it was magic. "Good morning," Eli said quietly. "There's food on the table." The woman looked at him with calm, cold eyes. "You didn't need to bring us here," she said softly. "You have already done too much," Eli shrugged. "Didn't seem right to leave you in the dirt." She sat down slowly, her movements graceful even though she was exhausted. "You don't understand who I am," she said. "If they find us here, you will lose everything." Eli leaned against the counter. "Ma'am, I don't own much to lose." The woman tilted her head, studying him as if he were a puzzle. "Humans, you live with so little yet speak as if you have everything. Maybe we just value different things," he said with a small smile. For a while, silence filled the room, except for the crackle of the fire. The children ate quietly, grateful but still nervous. Every sound made them flinch. Eli noticed how the oldest one, maybe 10 years old, kept watching the window, ready to run. After breakfast, Eli showed them the barn. "You can stay here for a few days," he said. "There's clean hay, blankets, and water. I'll see if I can find better clothes for the little ones." The woman looked around the barn. It was simple but clean. Sunlight fell through broken panels, lighting the dust like tiny stars. She touched one of the wooden beams and frowned. "You built this yourself?" "Mostly," Eli said. "My father started it before he passed." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am Lady Serana Valkyr of the Valorian High Council. I once owned 12 cities across 2 moons. My husband was part of the Senate before the coup. When he was killed, they took everything. My home, my ships, even my name. Now I am hunted," Eli nodded slowly. "So that's why those drones were after you?" "Yes," she whispered. "They call me a traitor. My only crime was not kneeling before the new ruler." Eli looked at her, his weathered face calm. "Well, kneeling never did sit right with humans either." Serana blinked, almost surprised by his answer. "You speak as if rebellion is natural." Eli smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." He turned to leave, but paused. "You and your kids are safe here. Rest while you can. I'll go into town later, get some supplies. Don't wander too far." When he left, Serana stood alone in the barn, feeling something strange. A quiet she hadn't known in years. Her people lived in marble towers and glowing cities, but there was no peace there. Here, among broken wood and dust, she felt something she couldn't name. Later that day, she watched through the window as Eli worked outside. He moved slowly but with purpose, fixing fences, feeding cattle, checking his solar pumps. No servants, no machines. Just hard work. And he didn't complain once. Her oldest child, Lyra, whispered, "Mother, why does he help us? He asked for nothing." Serana didn't answer right away. She simply watched Eli in silence. "I don't know," she finally said. "But humans, they're strange." That night the sky turned violet. Eli lit a fire outside and the smell of cooked grain and spices filled the air. The children ate happily this time, laughing softly. Serana sat apart, still cautious but calmer. Eli poured her a cup of warm tea. "You don't have to be scared here," he said. She looked at the steam rising from the cup. "Fear is all I've known since the Empire fell." "Well," he said, poking the fire, "maybe it's time to know something else." For the first time, Serana smiled, a small, tired smile that made her look less like a fallen queen and more like a mother. But far beyond the ranch, The night sky glimmered with faint metallic dots, patrol drones. They had found the trail again, and soon the peace on Eli's ranch would shatter like glass. The morning sun had barely risen when Eli Ward noticed something wrong. The birds were quiet. The air felt too still. Even the old cattle near the fence stood uneasy, their ears twitching toward the distant hills. He stepped out of his house, rifle in hand, scanning the wide plains. The golden light stretched far, but something shimmered on the horizon, metal shapes glinting under the sun. He didn't need binoculars to know what they were. Empire drones, he muttered under his breath. They found her. Inside the barn, Serana Valkyr was feeding her children a simple breakfast of boiled grain when Eli stormed in. His calm eyes were now sharp with urgency. "Get the kids and stay quiet," he said quickly. "We've got company." Serana froze. "The Empire?" he nodded. "Scouts, maybe a dozen. But they'll call more." Her face went pale. She pulled her children close, whispering in her native tongue. "Lyra, hold your brothers. Don't make a sound." Eli moved a few hay bales aside, revealing a small wooden trapdoor beneath the floorboards. "You'll hide here," he said. "It leads to an old storage pit. The signal blockers down there will keep them from finding you." Serana looked down at the dark space, her pride fighting against her fear. "You expect me to hide like a thief?" Eli looked at her steadily. "No, ma'am. I expect you to live." Something in his tone broke through her stubbornness. She nodded and climbed down with the children. Eli pulled the trapdoor shut and scattered hay over it, making it look untouched. Moments later, the sound of hover engines filled the air. Dust and wind roared outside as 3 armored transports landed near his barn. Soldiers in black armor stepped out, their helmets reflecting the sun. The symbol of the Valorian Empire, a golden serpent, shone on their shoulders. One of them, an officer with a mechanical arm, approached Eli. "You are the human rancher known as Ward?" "That's me," Eli said, leaning casually on his rifle. The officer's red visor glowed. "You are harboring a fugitive, Lady Serana Valkyr and her offspring. By imperial law, you are ordered to surrender them immediately." Eli squinted, pretending to think. "Sorry, can't say I've seen anyone fancy out here." "You sure you're in the right place? We don't get many ladies visiting this far out." The officer's voice grew colder. "Don't lie, human. Our scanners traced her vehicle to this sector." Eli shrugged. "Then your scanners are broken. You want to check the barn? Go ahead. Just don't spook my cattle. They don't like strangers." The officer stared at him for a long moment, then signaled his men. 2 soldiers entered the barn, weapons ready. They scanned every corner, but Eli had built that floor to last. Thick beams, double layering, and plenty of hay. The scanner lights blinked red. No life signs detected. After a tense few minutes, the soldiers returned. "Nothing, sir." The officer's mechanical fingers clicked in frustration. He turned back to Eli. "If you are lying, human, the Empire will burn this place to ash." Eli gave him a slow, tired smile. "Then I guess I better tell the cattle to move out first." The officer's helmet turned slightly as if confused by the human's calmness. Finally, he raised his hand. "We are not finished here." He gestured to his men, and the squad boarded their transports. The engines roared to life, and the ships lifted off, disappearing into the clouds. The moment the sound faded, Eli ran back into the barn. He knelt and opened the trap door. "You can come out now," he whispered. Serana climbed out with her children, her eyes wide. "They were right above us," she whispered, her voice shaking. "If they had found us—" "They didn't," Eli said simply. "You're safe. For now." She looked at him in disbelief. "You risked everything. Why?" He wiped the sweat from his brow. "Because no one deserves to be hunted. Not on my land." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had lived among nobles and generals, people who spoke of honor and loyalty. But few ever acted like this simple human. As evening fell, the children helped Eli feed the cattle. Lyra smiled for the first time, chasing one of the smaller animals across the yard. The sight made Serana's heart ache. It had been so long since she'd seen them laugh. Eli leaned on the fence beside her. "You might want to stay put for a few more days. The Empire will be watching the roads," she nodded quietly. "I understand. You have my gratitude, Eli Ward." He looked at her, his rough features softening. "You don't owe me anything, just keep your kids safe." That night, as the stars shone above the silent plains, Serana sat awake near the barn window, watching the horizon. She could still see the faint glimmer of the Empire's ships far away, but now something new stirred in her heart. A strange warmth, a fragile hope. She didn't trust humans, not yet, but she trusted this one, and deep inside she knew, sooner or later, the Empire would return. And next time it would not be with words. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. The wind blew gently across Eli Ward's ranch, carrying the soft hum of insects and the low sound of cattle. To anyone passing by, it looked like a forgotten human farm on the edge of the world, but inside it was now a shelter, a secret home for a fallen alien noble and her children. Lady Serana Valkyr watched the sunrise from the porch each morning. She used to see the twin suns of her homeworld from the balcony of a golden palace. There the air smelled of perfume and crystal gardens. Here it smelled of dust, iron, and coffee. Yet somehow it felt more real. Eli was always busy. He woke before dawn, fixed fences, repaired his broken solar panels, and cared for his animals. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried quiet wisdom. Serana often found herself watching him work, wondering how a man with so little could carry himself with such peace. Her children had changed too. The youngest, Rianne, learned to feed the cattle. The twins helped Eli gather crops from the field. They laughed for the first time in months. Their giggles filled the air like music. One afternoon, as Eli showed the children how to plant seeds in the soil, Serana stepped forward, curiosity in her eyes. "Why do humans dig holes and bury food?" she asked, arms crossed. Eli smiled faintly. "We don't bury food. We plant hope." She tilted her head. "Hope?" he nodded. "You give the ground a chance to return something better. You feed it, care for it, and wait. That's how we survive." Serana looked at the soil, then at her hands, soft once, now stained with dirt. She knelt beside him and pressed her palm into the earth. "On my world, we made machines grow our food. We never touched the soil." "Maybe that's why your empire broke," Eli said quietly. She looked up sharply. "You dare judge the Valorian Empire?" He met her eyes without fear. "No, ma'am. But I've seen too many great things fall apart because people forgot what made them strong in the first place." His words stayed in her mind long after he walked away. That night she sat by the barn fire thinking of her world, the greed, the hunger for power, the wars that tore apart the Senate. She had believed her empire would last forever. But now she saw it clearly. It had fallen long before the soldiers came for her. Later she found Eli sitting by the corral looking at the stars. "You said something today," she began softly. "About forgetting what makes us strong. What makes humans strong, Eli Ward?" He poked at the campfire with a stick, thinking. "We break easy," he said finally. "But we get up again. That's all. That's what makes us hard to kill." Serana smiled faintly. "In the Empire, strength meant power, control, fear, but you talk of weakness as if it is your armor." "Maybe it is," he replied. "We don't have fleets or fancy palaces. Just each other. That's enough." The flames danced between them, painting their faces in warm orange light. For the first time since she lost her home, Serana laughed quietly. A real laugh. "You humans are truly strange." Eli grinned. "We get that a lot." The peaceful days continued. Serana learned to milk the old farm beasts, to mend fences, to cook simple food. She even began teaching her children the human language. The ranch started to feel like something she hadn't known in years, a home. But peace never lasts long on the edge of empire. One evening, while the suns dipped behind the hills, Eli's radio crackled with static. A voice came through, broken and urgent. "Eli Ward, do you copy? They're back. Scanners show multiple ships heading your way. Get ready." Eli's face hardened. He turned toward the horizon. In the distance, faint lights blinked in the sky, approaching fast. Serana stepped beside him. "They found us again." He nodded slowly. "Looks that way." She clenched her fists. "I will not run again." Eli loaded his rifle, calm as ever. "Didn't plan on running." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of metal and smoke. The cattle began to stir. The children peeked from the barn, fear in their glowing eyes. Eli looked at Serana and said quietly, "If they come for you, they'll have to go through me first." Her throat tightened. "Why do you care so much for someone you barely know?" Eli looked at her then, steady, unshaken. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything." And as night fell, the first Empire ships broke through the clouds, their shadows spreading across the land like wings of death. But this time the hunted weren't running. They were ready to fight. Night fell heavy over the plains of Terra 5. The stars looked sharp, almost cruel, hanging above the lonely ranch like silent witnesses. A cold wind moved across the fields, carrying the smell of dust, oil, and something darker: fear. Eli Ward stood on the porch, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. He had seen the lights earlier, 3 ships moving slow and low before vanishing behind the ridge. They hadn't attacked yet, but he knew what it meant. The Empire was searching again. Inside, Lady Serana Valkyr tucked her children into bed in the small room Eli had cleared for them. The youngest clung to her arm. "Mama, are the bad men coming back?" he whispered. She smiled softly, though her voice shook. "Not tonight, my heart. The stars will guard us," but deep inside she knew better. Stars didn't guard anyone anymore. When she came out to the porch, Eli handed her a mug of warm tea. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," she answered, looking into the darkness. "You risk too much for me." "I don't understand it." Eli's voice was calm. "You don't have to. Some things we do because they're right, not because they make sense." She studied his weathered face, lined, tired, yet steady. She envied his peace, that quiet human strength she could never quite explain. For the first time, she wondered if her people had truly understood humans at all. The night stretched on. The two sat in silence, watching the wind stir the fields. But neither of them saw the flicker of movement near the outer fence. A shadow crouched behind an old solar panel, holding a small transmitter. It was Cal Dorn, a local settler from the nearby town of Ledge Hollow. A man Eli had helped many times, lent him tools, shared fuel, even saved his injured son once. But Cal's debts had grown deep, and the Empire had offered more credits than he could ever refuse. He pressed the button on the transmitter. A faint blue light blinked once, sending the coordinates into the dark sky. Then he disappeared into the night. Morning came too quiet. No birds, no wind. Even the cattle seemed uneasy. Eli felt it immediately. He walked outside, scanning the ridges. Something in the air had changed, thick, heavy, like before a storm. Inside the barn, Serana noticed it too. Her instincts from years in the Empire's court told her danger was near. She turned to Eli, eyes sharp. "We have to move now." Eli frowned. "Move where?" "There's no safe place for 50 miles. Before she could answer, the ground trembled. Engines, low, deep, approaching fast. Eli grabbed his rifle. "Get the kids to the back cellar," he ordered. The children ran, terrified. Serana hesitated only for a second before obeying. She knew there was no arguing with that tone. Outside, dust clouds appeared on the horizon, 3 dropships in tight formation. Empire markings. Behind them, armored ground vehicles cut through the plains. Eli's jaw tightened. They're not scouting this time. They're coming for blood. The ships landed with a roar that shook the ground. Soldiers poured out, their armor gleaming black under the sun. Their leader, a tall officer with a pale face and silver implants, stepped forward. "Human," he shouted through his speaker. "You are charged with treason for aiding a fugitive of the Empire. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Eli spat in the dust. "You'll have to work for it." The officer raised his hand. The soldiers aimed their rifles. Then came a deep hum, energy weapons charging. Eli took cover behind a pile of hay bales, returning fire with his old ballistic rifle. Each shot echoed through the valley. The bullets couldn't pierce their armor, but they slowed them down. Inside the cellar, Serana held her children close. Every explosion above shook the ground. "He's fighting for us," she whispered, her heart pounding. A human, fighting the Empire. Her oldest daughter, Lyra, looked up with tears in her eyes. "We can't just hide, Mama." Serana froze. Her daughter's words hit like a blade of truth. She thought of her people, how they had once ruled galaxies, then hid when power turned against them. She thought of Eli standing alone against an army. Her voice trembled. "You're right." She kissed her children's foreheads. "Stay here." Then she rose, her eyes burning with fierce light. Outside, Eli was cornered. His truck was burning and his rifle was empty. The officer approached, smirking. "This is what humans are, stubborn animals clinging to dirt." Before he could raise his weapon, a piercing sound cut through the air, a Valorian pulse rifle firing from behind the barn. Blue energy streaks sliced through the soldiers. Serana stood there, cloak fluttering, holding an old alien weapon Eli had salvaged weeks ago. Her voice was cold, commanding. You dare touch what is under my protection? The soldiers hesitated. For a heartbeat, even the officer faltered. Eli grinned despite the blood on his face. Told you not to wander too far, he said. Serana moved beside him, firing with perfect aim. Her children joined her soon after, using small handheld shockers from their homeworld. Together, human and alien fought side by side, their defiance blazing bright against the Empire's might. But as the enemy retreated for now, Eli looked at the wrecked field and the smoke rising into the sky. His gut turned heavy. They'll be back, he muttered. And next time they'll bring more. Serana looked at him, her voice low. Then let them come. They will not find slaves here. They will find a family. And far above, in the orbit of Terra 5, the Empire's fleet shifted course, preparing for war. The first light of dawn crept across the broken plains of Terra 5, turning the smoke-filled sky into streaks of gold and red. The air smelled of burnt metal and dust. Ash drifted like snow across the ranch where Eli Ward and Lady Serana Valkyr had made their stand. The ground was scarred with black craters. The fences were gone, the barn half collapsed. The cattle had fled into the hills. Yet in the middle of the wreckage, Eli still stood, exhausted, wounded, but alive. He leaned against his old truck, now riddled with bullet holes, and checked his rifle. The magazine was empty. The next wave would be soon. Behind him, Serana knelt beside her children, her silver skin dimmed with dust and blood. Her youngest clung to her arm, crying softly. The others tried to stay brave, but their glowing eyes betrayed their fear. Eli turned toward her. You should take the kids and go, he said. There's still time before they land. Serana shook her head. I will not run again. I will not teach my children to run from what's right. Eli gave a tired smile. Then I guess we stand together. From the horizon, the Empire ships appeared. 3 black vessels descending like carrion birds, engines roaring, dust whipping across the field. The sound rattled the bones of the earth. Serana looked up, eyes blazing. That is the same sound I heard when they burned my city, she whispered. Eli checked his sidearm. Only 2 bullets left. Then let's make sure they don't burn this one. The ships landed, kicking up a storm of dust and heat. Dozens of soldiers poured out, armored head to toe, carrying plasma rifles and shock shields. Their leader, the same pale officer from before, stepped forward again. His armor gleamed in the rising sun. Human, he called out through his amplifier. You have one last chance. Surrender the fugitive and your death will be painless. Eli spat blood into the dirt. You think I care about painless? The officer's cold voice echoed. You stand against an empire alone. You cannot win. Eli raised his rifle and said simply, Maybe not, but I can make you bleed. The officer's visor flashed red. Fire. The battlefield erupted. Blue plasma and bullets filled the air. Eli moved fast, firing from behind the wrecked truck. Each shot cracked like thunder. Every time a soldier fell, 2 more took his place. Serana stood beside him, cloak torn, wielding her old pulse rifle like a queen reclaiming her throne. Her eyes glowed bright silver as she shouted in her native tongue, rallying cries that made her children lift their own weapons. Stay behind me, she ordered, voice strong and proud. Eli was hit once in the shoulder but didn't stop. He switched arms, reloaded with trembling hands, and kept firing. Every shot, every breath was a fight. One of the soldiers reached the fence and charged. Eli tackled him, wrestling in the dirt, knocking the plasma rifle away. The man's visor cracked as Eli slammed his head against a rock. The human rose again, covered in blood and dust, panting but defiant. For a moment, the gunfire stopped. Smoke rolled across the field. The officer stepped forward through the haze, his weapon glowing bright blue. Enough of this, he said. The woman dies first. He aimed at Serana. Before he could fire, Eli stepped in front of her, arms wide. The blast hit him square in the chest, throwing him to the ground. Serana screamed his name and ran to him. He was still breathing, barely. Blood ran down his neck, staining the dirt red. She held his face in her trembling hands. Why would you do this for me? Eli's voice was weak, but his eyes still burned with that same human fire. Because you're family now. Then, through the rising smoke came a sound, deep and distant at first, then growing louder. Engines. Many engines. The officer turned, confused. What is that? Out of the clouds came ships, but not Imperial ones. Rusted, patched, rough-built rebel ships painted with old human and alien symbols alike. They descended in formation, firing plasma bursts at the Empire troops. A rebel voice echoed through the comms. "This is the Free Coalition of Terra. Stand down or burn." The Empire soldiers scattered as the rebels unleashed fire from above. Serana pulled Eli behind the ruins, covering him as explosions tore the ground apart. Her children huddled close, their small hands gripping her arms. The officer tried to flee to his ship, but a plasma rocket struck it mid-air, turning it into fire and shrapnel. When the battle finally ended, the sun was high. Smoke drifted across the valley, and the once silent ranch was now littered with the ruins of two worlds. One human, one alien. Serana knelt beside Eli, who lay breathing weakly, his shirt burned and torn. "It's over," she whispered, tears on her cheeks. "You saved us." Eli looked at her children, then at the sky where rebel ships now hovered like guardians. His lips curved into a faint smile. "Guess humanity's not done yet." Serana gripped his hand tightly. "No," she said softly. "You've just reminded us what it means to be alive." Above them, the sky cleared, and the wind carried away the last of the smoke. The battle for one ranch had ended, but the spark it lit, the unity between human and alien, was only just beginning. The twin suns of Terra 5 rose over a land forever changed. The air still smelled faintly of smoke and steel, but the cries of battle had faded into silence. The once lonely ranch stood in ruins, its fences burned, its barn shattered, but from that ruin came the faint, steady sound of life. Birds returned to the quiet sky. Wind brushed through the blackened grass, and among the wreckage, the story of a single human rancher began to spread across the stars. Inside what was left of his farmhouse, Eli Ward lay on a rough bed made of scrap metal and blankets. His chest was bandaged, his breathing slow but alive. His skin was pale, but his eyes, when they opened, still carried the same calm fire that had terrified an empire. Beside him, Lady Serana Valkyr sat silently, her once noble robes torn and patched with human cloth. Her children slept near the corner, huddled under a borrowed coat. For the first time in her life, she had no palace, no army, no titles. And yet, she had something far greater: hope. When Eli stirred, she immediately leaned forward. "Easy," she whispered. "You've been asleep for 2 days." He groaned, managing a faint grin. "I was hoping it was longer. I could use the rest." Serana actually laughed, a soft, genuine laugh. It surprised even her. "You nearly died, human. Yet you still joke." Eli's voice was raspy but steady. "If I'm still breathing, I'm still fighting." Outside, the plains were no longer empty. Rebel ships had landed near the ranch. The Free Coalition, made up of escaped humans, alien deserters, and outcasts who had grown tired of the Empire's cruelty. They moved carefully through the wreckage, collecting the wounded, burying the fallen, and repairing what they could. A rebel commander, an older alien with dark bronze skin and kind eyes, approached the house. "You're the one they call Eli Ward?" Eli nodded weakly. The commander bowed his head. "Your stand here lit a spark across a dozen systems. Word has spread. A human rancher defied the Empire and lived. Entire colonies are rising because of it." Eli blinked slowly. "All I did was protect a family." The commander smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's how revolutions start." That night, a fire burned outside the ruined barn. Humans and aliens sat together for the first time as equals, sharing food, stories, and quiet laughter under the same stars. Serana stood beside the flames, her silver skin reflecting the firelight. She spoke softly, but her voice carried far. "On my world," she began, "we believed power came from bloodlines and crowns. We built cities of glass and metal, and called ourselves eternal. But a humble human rancher showed me something greater. He had no palace, no army, no title. Yet his courage burned brighter than any empire." The camp fell silent. Every face turned toward Eli, who sat nearby, still weak but awake, listening quietly. Serana continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "He didn't save me because of who I was. He saved me because that's what humans do. They stand when no one else will." Her words hung in the air like a vow. Weeks passed. The coalition turned Eli's ranch into their first base of freedom. Refugees arrived daily, some human, some alien, all fleeing the Empire. They called it Haven's Rise. What began as a broken ranch slowly became a symbol of unity. Eli recovered, though the scars never faded. He refused any rank or command. "I'm no leader," he'd say. "Just a rancher who hates bullies." Serana often worked beside him, repairing walls, tending the new crops, teaching the children, both human and alien, how to live together. The sight of the once proud Valorian noblewoman hauling wood and laughing with farmers became legend. Her daughter Lyra, once frightened and silent, grew brave. She trained with human rebels, swearing to protect what Eli had built. "This place," she said, "is proof that hearts matter more than blood." Years later, when peace finally returned to the colonies, a monument stood on the same hill where the Empire once landed. It showed a man in a torn coat, rifle in one hand, his other arm stretched out to shield a mother and her children. Below it, words were carved in both human and Valorian. He had no army. He had no power, but he had humanity, and that was enough. On the day of the unveiling, Serana stood before the monument, her silver hair touched with streaks of white. She looked up at the statue of Eli Ward and whispered, "You never wanted glory, but now even the stars will remember your name." Her children stood beside her, proud and strong. Around them, both humans and aliens gathered, farmers, soldiers, wanderers, all united by a single story. The story of one man who refused to bow. As the sun set over Terra 5, their light bathed the land in fire and gold, and somewhere in that endless sky it felt as if Eli's spirit watched over them, quiet, humble, eternal. Because one human rancher's courage had not only saved a family, it had changed the galaxy forever.